Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, aliens, one mind, one world for us all. This is Attican, the Lonely Ronin, continuing with our dictation of the recently released Epstein files, Maxwell files. And we are on chapter 5 of Virginia Roberts' prose, her written prose, where she details from the beginning of, I think, 13 years old, her first time being trafficked was actually not by Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell. It was by this man she calls Ron. I think his last name is Enninger. Don't quote me on that because she actually doesn't say his last name in the prose so far. But where we left off on part 6 was the end of chapter 4, and she had just met Ms. Maxwell and Epstein, and she had been trafficked to them, or basically partaken in two massages so far. So this is the morning after. Chapter 5. I walked up the stairs by myself this time, taking in more of the decor. Noticing the more I looked around, the more I noticed a different girl in each photograph in his collection of half-nude and topless girls on display around his mansion. I couldn't believe how many girls there were. It's not like Jeffrey was much to look at. He was an aging man in his early 50s with shiny gray hair and characteristic lines drawn down his face as if he had seen harder days. With no prospects of ever settling down or having a family of his own, Jeffrey treated us girls like a piece of clothing he could try on for the day and get rid of the next. So why was there so many girls in these photos? I wondered to myself if I would end up one of those girls among his collection of forgotten relationships and broken promises. I continued to make my way up the stairs, and as if all my senses were heightened from my bare nerves being exposed, I could smell the cleaning detergents recently used by the housekeepers. My observations of the shade of lighting through the concealed blinds as I entered Jeffrey's bedroom appeared golden, and the sound of stillness, except for the thud of my rapid heart beating, all made me more aware of how nervous I was to be on my own. Not that Ghislaine was anything of a comfort, but I didn't know what to expect or how I was going to lead myself into upholding my obligation in pleasing him. I would hope for the best, I thought, trying to uplift my confidence as I opened the door to the massage room, with the typical scene of Jeffrey laying naked, face down in the massage bed, waiting for his entertainment. It was deja vu's all over again. Repeating what Ghislaine had taught me, with him commenting on what else I should be doing until it got to the end, and I was expected to grant him all of his spoken desires. We finished up with the shower again, and he seemed very pleased in my contribution of myself to him, giving in to every request. He told me to go ask Juan to pay me, as he was lethargic after the massage, an intimate affair between us, and now was going to have sleep. I walked back downstairs and told Juan that Jeffrey was asleep, and said I had to ask him for my pay. He went to Jeffrey's desk and took out the exact amount I was owed, without even asking how much I normally get paid. He then drove me home, only to be back the next afternoon. The following week was a daily routine, providing Jeffrey with massages and continuously being groomed to fulfill all his needs. Often joined by Ms. Maxwell and her assistant Emmy for sexual trysts of all kinds. I was mentally and physically exhausted from the week of working and having to keep up with Jeffrey's strenuous late-night activities. I couldn't believe what I was doing, but it all started to sink in fast. Most nights when I got home, I'd briefly say hi to mom and dad before heading straight to my bedroom. I couldn't even sleep well anymore. Closing my eyes at night, I would fight the inevitable flood of thoughts, replaying the moments of shame that ate away myself piece by piece. My only reasoning being I just had to keep telling myself it would all be worth it in the end. This afternoon, Ghislaine appeared to be in a much better mood. Instead of taking me straight up to Jeffrey, she took me to a yellow guest room where Emmy mostly stayed. It had a balcony where Emmy was already outside reading a magazine and puffing on a cigarette. Ghislaine lit one up too and then offered me one. I hadn't smoked cigarettes much before, besides trying to look cool in front of one of my friends, but never really took to them. So when I started to cough from the inhalation of smoke, the girls began to laugh and joke about my inexperience. It was an icebreaker for all of us to laugh and poke fun at me. I was then able to give it back to them, saying I would rather be an inexperienced non-smoker than an old lady with a raspy smoker's cough. I don't think Ghislaine was used to somebody giving it back to her, but she seemed to like it as long as she was able to have the last say. I knew my boundaries, and she liked that I wouldn't cross those invisible lines. All three of us chatted like friends, and it started to feel like some kind of strange relationship was budding. After about 15 minutes of chatting away, Ghislaine instructed me to wash my hands thoroughly, as Jeffrey hated the smell of smokers, and follow her down the hallway to the massage room where he'll be expecting me shortly. I did what she asked and sprayed myself with the body spray that I always carried in my purse and headed down the hall to Jeffrey's room. When I opened the door to the massage room, surprisingly, it was empty. I sat down on the already made-up massage table and was careful not to mess up the neatly folded towels on the end of the bed. It was a good 15 more minutes before Jeffrey made his appearance. It was strange seeing him in clothes for the first time. He wasn't wearing what you'd expect your typical billionaire's attire to be. He was wearing a pair of sweatpants and a Harvard sweatshirt, which he began to remove immediately. This time, he wanted to commence our session in the steam room, so I began to undress as well. We went into the steam room, and he pushed a few buttons, and the steam began to pour in from the marble walls built in jets. There was a bench coming out of the wall, also made out of marble, that went from either side of the room and had a step underneath it where I was instructed to sit on so that I could begin giving Jeffrey his massage. Our conversation started off about simple things like how is your day at work? And I asked Jeffrey how his day was lounging around, just being polite to each other. He was acting out of character, being a lot more attentive and conversing with me about other things than sex or massages for once. Starting with his heels, ankles, toes, and arches and the soles of his feet, I massaged all the way up to his calves. It took a lot more strength to massage in the steam room without oils or lotions, and the constant blowing of steam in your face making me twice as exerted. I was beginning to really heat up when the door to the room opened suddenly to reveal two naked women. Glenn and Emmy acted as if they came in to join us for a steam bath, but my instincts were telling me otherwise. At least the cold burst of air and a skate scene revived me a bit. There was Jeffrey and Glenn sitting on top of this marble bench, each with a young girl at their feet. Emmy and I continued with the massage until they were ready to head into the shower. There were two shower heads that Glenn and Jeffrey both stood under while they were being lathered with soap bubbles as we washed their bodies. After the shower, Glenn led us into Jeffrey's bed to finish today's session with Emmy. Glenn and I performing lesbian acts of foreplay on each other while Jeffrey laid back and watched. Stroking his manhood in much delight, he brought himself to climax, and the session was over within moments. We all got dressed and went downstairs to the kitchen for some refreshments. Like nothing had happened at all. It was all so bizarre for me, the whole ordeal with them since this all began. I couldn't understand why Glenn and Jeffrey had such an openly intimate relationship, but yet never regarded themselves as partners. They rarely kissed and never held hands or even slept in the same bed. It was more like a sexual arrangement between the two of them. She brings in the girls for his peculiar tastes, and he supplies the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to before her family lost all their fortunes. I wasn't sure how to act or feel, always obliging to their needs, but reserved enough not to get attached, as if there was this invisible hierarchy, and by instinct I knew my place. We all hung out in the kitchen for a while before I asked when Juan could bring me home, as I had work in the morning and was tired. They said no problem, called Juan on the intercom right away, but said we'd all have something to talk about tomorrow. I knew it had something to do with my employment trial. And from the way they were acting tonight, I could only assume I got the job. But you never know with these people. Their types and partnerships can change like the weather. Went home that night, still confused on how I could let myself sink so low. I had to put on an act like I enjoyed submitting my body and being their new subservient plaything, all for the fact that I was making anywhere between $200 to $400 for just a couple of hours. Then spent the rest of the night regressing on the entire event in my head over and over again. I battled those thoughts with the hope that I was receiving a profession out of this and making good money in the meantime. All I had to do was keep lying to myself long enough until I eventually believed it. Arriving at Jeffrey's on time the next afternoon, as I always did. This time when Juan answered the door, he told me Mr. Epstein was waiting for me upstairs in the massage, which I placed upon the marble basin. Having one last look in the mirror before exhaling a deep breath, as if I was plunging into deep water, I knew today was a big day. About what decision to make, I just opened the door to the steam room and let them do the talking. Used to the routine by now, I sat below Jeffrey and began to massage his feet and legs as I listened in on their ongoing conversation about travel plans for the next few weeks. Ghislaine and Jeffrey turned their attention to me and asked me how would I like to go to see the big city of Manhattan. I told them I had never visited New York before, and it sounded like an adventure, but my job at Mar-a-Lago was only a summer job. I wouldn't be able to get the time off, especially that summer was so busy. Anyways, Jeffrey then made his announcement that I should quit my job at Mar-a-Lago and become his permanent traveling masseuse. He then further persuaded me with all of the luxuries that came along with my acceptance. Rather than be paid $9 per hour in my current job, I could be earning $200 per massage, which he even said could be a few times a day. Tomorrow, we could be leaving Palm Beach together in his private jet, first heading to his residence in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, also the largest mansion in New York. And we would be next setting off to the Caribbean, where he owned a secluded island just past Little St. James for a bit of relaxation. The temptation of his grandeur offer wasn't hard to give into. My vulnerability to be lured into his grasp seemed comforting all the time. The idea that females were nothing more than an empty shell of beauty bound by only a body to offer was a notion I had accepted a long time ago with my first teacher, Ron. My reaction had to be more than amusing for their egos. Even though I was excited to be traveling, I could only imagine the likeliness of having to be at their beck and call as well. In my head, I just told myself we all do what we have to do in our lives to succeed, no matter what it takes. And with no one knowing the truth, I had no one to talk me out of it. I accepted his offer and knew from here on out I would be his servant to his sexual desires until one day I would gain my credentials, and only then could I go out on my own and make it into this world that when so young seems so uncomfortable. Okay, give me 1 sec. I'm going to take a sip and adjust my camera. Do that. The night advanced into the usual grooming of his requirements. For the next hour and a half being exploited to satisfy Jeffrey's every sexual whim. My mom cornered me that night before I had a chance to avoid speaking to anyone, heading to the shower in my bedroom like I had been the last week. She knocked at my door with a hostile look in her eyes. Virginia, what exactly does an older couple want with a 15-year-old girl who has no credentials and with no experience in massage therapy? She used that stern tone of voice that she's always had when I was in trouble. Thus, as impressionable as I was, my blue eyes batted their innocence in her direction, and I flashed her a girlish grin, selling her the pitch that I had been given earlier that night. Not mentioning the other side of the glamorous lifestyle I would soon be living in. I told her about the money I'd be earning, the places I'd be seeing, the people I could meet, and most of all, the trade I'd be learning. It all sounded so good, except it was a bunch of lies I had to tell her and myself to otherwise convince us that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I had to take it. She asked when all this would start, and as shocking as it was to me too, told her I had to go start packing. We were leaving the next morning off to New York City. At 15, most girls would be sucking up to their parents to go to a high school dance or to go on a date to the movies with a nervous chap. But I wasn't even asking her. I was simply letting her know that I would be away for the next couple weeks, maybe 3, and would keep in contact when I got free time. Her daughter was lost a long time ago, and she now just realized it. Backing out of the bathroom with nothing she could say, she left me wondering to myself who I was becoming. Instead of driving me to work the next morning, my dad dropped me off at Jeffrey's mansion. He told me not to worry about calling Mar-a-Lago. He would take care of it for me. We said our goodbyes outside in the driveway, Jeffrey even coming outside to meet with my father to shake his hands and assure him that his daughter will be more than looked after. I hugged my dad tightly, feeling like I was on the verge of a steep cliff. When he let go, so did the last of my innocence. Juan drove Jeffrey, Ghislaine, and I to Palm Beach's private airport, and the luggage handlers escorted us on the tarmac. Tarmac. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at spelling errors. Where we all boarded on Jeffrey's blackjack. Larry was his main pilot. He had shiny gray hair and long, lanky legs, but a very sincere smile that instantly made you feel at ease. He greeted us at the staircase that led into the main cabin. It was as lavish as I imagined it would be. The seats were enveloped in the finest beige leather with polished wood grain finishes, and there was a kitchen in the back with an adjoining toilet. Jeffrey saw the amazement in my eyes, and to make it more thrilling, he brought me up to the cockpit and let me watch with a bird's eye view of the takeoff. I was on a natural high when I came back to the cabin, and was instantly brought back down when Jeffrey rested his bare feet on top of the reclined seat and instructed me to get to work and start massaging him. My future was in his hands now, so when he wanted something, I wouldn't hesitate in giving it to him. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. Upon our arrival at New Jersey's private airstrip, the driver Jojo met us. His name was most likely shortened for something of his Oriental descent. Jeffrey liked to shorten names of his multicultural staff into American names. Even Juan and Maria were known as John and Mary. We arrived in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. His principal place of residence was the largest home in Manhattan, 8 stories of opulence. It used to be a private school for boys many years ago, until Les Wexner, Jeffrey's best friend and mentor, bought it for him as a mysterious gift. There were 2 large Chinese gargoyles outside the entrance, and beside the heavy-looking wooden doors, there was an intercom with a camera overlooking us. I walked up the concrete steps into a realm of wealth, glamour, and most of all, influence. My eyes glistened at the splendor of his palace. Caramel-colored marble tiles spread through the first floor, where his gourmet kitchen and dining hall were also located. Then, I came to a sweeping staircase that curved into the next level where Jeffrey and I went into his office, even though it looked more like a museum exhibit. Ancient draperies that told lascivious stories of their own covered parts of the elevated walls, and the remaining wall spaces were taken up by rows on top of rows of books. He loved to read, as he often found it hard to sleep and was comforted in the early hour mornings with his literature, or sometimes in other ways I would come to find out. There was a mantelpiece and a sofa with 2 armchairs next to the grand piano that flaunted more of Jeffrey's beautiful conquests. Young women posing in salacious pictures, suggesting I could be easily replaced next to one of those girls if I failed in keeping him satisfied. There are also some pictures with recognizable political and royal figures, either shaking Jeffrey's hand or with an arm around each other. Even one with Jeffrey and the Dalai Lama, although his church was the bank. He liked to use his power, wealth, and money to manipulate everyone in his life. He made a phone call that sounded businesslike, and I didn't mind. I was quite enjoying taking in all the beauty around me. I was blinded by all of it. I was still waiting for him when Ghislaine came in. She asked me what I thought so far on my trip to New York. I knew she was talking about the house. She loved to gloat. Even though none of it actually belonged to her, she wanted everyone to believe that it did. I complimented her on the medieval-looking tapestries and a few other adornments, when she cut me off mid-sentence to compliment it herself, telling me the history about one of the 17th century tapestries to which an unsophisticated eye looked to me like a rug on the wall. Jeffrey hung the phone up and walked over to the sofa where we were sitting next to the mantelpiece and took a seat on one of his armchairs. He didn't seem worried from the phone call, but his mind was definitely somewhere else from the hard look on his face. We all spoke for a few moments more about the splendid decor when Jeffrey had enough small talk and needed some of his own relaxation time. He told Ghislaine he was going to show me to the massage room and he'd be back in a couple hours. She agreed he looked like he could use some time to unwind, and with that wry grin of hers, she gave me a look that told me precisely how he was expecting to be relaxed. We left his office altogether, Ghislaine going upstairs and Jeffrey showing me to the lifts. The lift looked like its original that came with the school. It was made out of brass antique with archaic cuts throughout the arches at the top. It wasn't the only lift in the house, but certainly the most beautiful. We walked down a long hall carpeted in a royal red and golden trim, passing by a bronze pagan statue of the horny little goat god Pan. How adequate, I thought. Fit Jeffrey to a T. We walked into this dimly lit room. A mother-daunting chamber that looked like we had stepped back in time to the Dark Ages. It took a second for my eyes to adjust to the darkness, and Jeffrey beckoned me to follow him through the room to the open adjoining shower, toilet, and steam room. The room was in black marble to accent the dreariness and smaller than the one in Palm Beach, but it had its own witchery feel to it. Another unseen side to this man I was coming to know. We both undressed, and I followed Jeffrey into the steam room first. He loved feeling clean, teaching me that the steam would deplete the toxins from your skin, which was great during massage when your blood flow is being replenished. I grabbed his foot out of instinct, knowing I had to be constantly on alert to keep this man satisfied. He looked down at me with a nod and reclined back against the wall as the steam poured in. This was his idea of alleviation. I worked up to his calves, and within a few more minutes, he said he was ready for his massage on the bed. We got out and towel dried off, both still nude. He asked me to stay undressed. Then we headed to massage bed in the middle of the room. He lay down on the bed and told me to turn on the CD player in the wall hutch, where all the oils and lotions were set out. I hit play, and a collection of mixed classical symphonies began to fill the silence. I could tell he wasn't in one of those moods to be uplifted with idle chat, so I remained silent, letting him enjoy my slow movements, making my way up his body. My instincts told me I was right about his mood, as he seemed to appreciate the quietness of moment and the leisurely of the strokes I was using to massage him. When I got to his scalp, he turned over and grabbed my hand to put on his erect manhood. No words spoken yet, I took the gesture and initiated what I had been taught over the last week. While pleasing my master, his hands groped my young flesh, penetrating my insides with his fingers. He was only concerned with what he wanted, as if I was a new car out for a test drive and he was pressing his new gadgets. His soft moans were soon brought to louder heaves of breath, and my job was done. No intimate kisses or sweet pillow talk. He showed his appreciation with money, never attachment. We concluded with a shower, and he told me he had some business to conduct. He walked me to the lift and told me to go to the next level, and my room was the first one on the right. It had an intercom in which he can contact me when needed. I hit number 5 on the lift and took his directions to my room. I opened the door to his massive loft, the size of an adequate house. I walked down the long hall, and my eyes took in the magnificence of my surroundings. It was a room fit for royalty, and later would find out had been stayed in by some. The room was trimmed in gold paint and had another eerie tapestry on the main wall as feature. There was a TV and a huge king-size bed, with goose-feathered comforter and pillows. All the glitter from Jeffrey's lifestyle he was offering me finally covered the last bit of sight I had left, and I let go of my consciousness. Excited by my enthralling day, not having anyone around to have to act reserved, I jumped into the soft bed and lay looking around, thinking about how quick life could change based on one swift decision. Gazing into the artistry, letting me know Jeffrey wanted to see me in his office now. Already, I thought to myself. I was just getting settled in. I was worried I was going to get lost in this ancient museum, but I got myself back to his office with no trouble. It was kind of hard to miss. I knocked at the slightly ajar door, and Jeffrey called for me to enter. I walked over to his desk, where he was just ending a phone call, and he opened his duffel bag full of money. I'll be out of my other office for most of the day, so instead of being locked inside, I thought you should go do some sightseeing for the day, since it is your first trip to the Big Apple. He didn't count how much he was giving me. He just handed me a bundle out of the banded $100 bills. He knew just how to pull the right strings, making me squeal in delight and give him a kiss in the cheek. Since we were never really emotionally intimate, it would be odd to act in any other way, but he seemed to like it. I ran upstairs to get dressed for city shopping and put my makeup on, then hit the streets of NYC looking for a place to start spending this load of dosh. When I got to the end of 72nd Street on 5th Ave, I had no idea which way to turn, left or right. I thought I'd just follow the lights past Central Park and see the local sights on my way. My eyes were once again peeled back in splendor. I had never imagined a place so busy with the hustle and bustle of all the walks of life. My first stop was to buy a disposable camera, and I was off taking photos of every wonder that caught my attention. I didn't do as much shopping as I had planned to. I was having too much fun exploring the capacious metropolitan. When I started to hit dusk, I began walking back to Jeffrey's, but not before stopping off to enjoy a giant slice of pepperoni pizza. It was the best I ever had. And considering I was going back to Jeffrey's chickpea and tofu salads or such, I really hated the healthy cuisine served by Jeffrey's personal chef. I was a naturally skinny girl, never watching what I ate, and to eat that food, I might as well have chewed on hay. I strolled back to Jeffrey and was missed. Glenn scolded me. You shouldn't have been gone so long, young lady. You need to know where you are at all times. You are on call for Jeffrey. I started to apologize, feeling guilty. I didn't want them to think I didn't take my job with them seriously. She cut off my explanation with a short conclusion to this conversation. We'll get you a cell phone tomorrow so we can always find you. I thanked her for her generosity and she dismissed me to my room. So I wasn't even needed after all. It was just a way for her to place me deeper in their control. The next few days I was on call as Ghislaine said I'd be. Venturing out to the city for only an hour or so at a time, I looked most forward to my outings. I would return to Jeffrey's mansion to attend his sexual desires. When he was finished with me, I'd be off to my adventures. The day before we were to be heading back to Palm Beach, Jeffrey had a new proposition for me. I could make double the money I was making if I was to look for pretty girls and convince them to come back to Jeffrey's to be further persuaded with money to engage in bisexual and sexual acts with Jeffrey and I. I asked him, how does one actually propose such a thing to a complete stranger? Well, he said in a build-up of another kind of lesson, if I were you, I would use your charm to entice them and my money to bring them. I would tell them you work for a multi-billionaire who has a taste for young, beautiful girls, and with his contacts in the acting, modeling, or rich husband world, your boss could help them. All they have to do is come and meet me first. If I wasn't so naive at the time, I would have seen that's exactly what he was doing with me. My prospects were massage credentials. With too much pain from my past, I could only have hope. Not that I was a shy girl, but picking up girls for one reason alone, only to be endorsed for her body, didn't sound like something I could do. But not wanting to displease my master, I told him that I would give it a go. You could tell he was instantly excited with my agreement. He started to reveal the politics of what kind of girls he was looking for. He wasn't into multicultural girls, a very chauvinistic perception. He said they had to be uniquely gorgeous to be accepted by him, but definitely no African American girls. He was racist against anything different to his kind. A very narrow-minded way of thinking for such a supposed brilliant man. The list went on and on. No girls with tattoos or piercings, or gothics, no drug users or prostitutes. Basically, he wanted everyone's daughter that looked like the girl next door, with blue eyes and blonde curly ringlets. I just nodded and smiled, wanting this to be over with and move on to another conversation. But so worked up from our previous talk, instead he persisted to show me exactly what I was good for to him. He took me up to the highest loft in his large mansion and he lay down on his large bed, expecting me to know exactly what he wanted done. As always, I complied. Part of me hating him for having to degrade myself to be so subservient to his sexual whims, and another part of me was telling myself to be grateful for the opportunities I was being given. The battles in my head were beginning to cause me too much anxiety. When we got back to Palm Beach, I asked my mom to make me a doctor's appointment for some headaches I had been getting lately, so she wouldn't question me. I walked out of the doctor's with a prescription for a mind-altering anxiety tablet called Xanax. Not only did it help with anxiety, but it also acted as a blanket over terrible memories. So when I had to perform degrading acts, I would take a few pills and forget what happened within the next hour, and be able to become someone without a battling conscience. I spent my sweet 16th birthday on his island in the Caribbean next to St. James Isle, as you like to call it, Little St. Jeff's. His ego was as enormous as his appetite for fornicating. I was given a birthday cake and a new collection of designer makeup from London. Glenn made a joke after I blew out my array of candles and said I'd be soon getting too old for Jeffrey's taste, and soon they'd have to trade me in. She was only half joking in a sad reality, though. A few days after my birthday, a girl was flying out to the island to join us for a few days before flying. Back to New York City, I was introduced to a pretty girl a few years my senior, named Sarah. She had long ash blonde hair and big brown eyes that hinted she had a cheeky nature. She had known Jeffrey before I had, and he was supposedly trying to help her getting an acting job in LA. She was obviously accustomed to the lifestyle he provided her, making it ever so apparent with her prompt attention she lavished on him. She would do things like strip nude and bathe around the swimming pool, taunting him for sex. She was good at what she did, even putting me at ease with her cool persona and funny jokes. Jeffrey told me privately that she was one of his best at procuring young girls into her entrapment and delivering them to him when he was in town. And when it came to time in the private chambers with Jeffrey, her and I, it wasn't very hard to comprehend. She was devoted to the moment, giving Jeffrey every imaginable lustful desire he could fathom. So this is Sarah Kellen we're talking about. Continuing. On the last night there, we all took a trip over to St. James to go for a stroll. Odd, I thought. It was past 7 p.m. and Jeffrey rarely strayed out past then, unless it was some event or a dinner party. While Glenn and him looked the average couple strolling arm in arm through the streets, he said to Sarah and I, "Why don't you two hit the nightclub here and see if there's anyone interesting to bring back for the evening?" It was more of an order than a request, and then I knew why we came out tonight and why Sarah was invited. Tonight was all about training, and Sarah was going to show me the ropes of picking up girls. Although there was no one to accustomed to Jeffrey's distinct taste to bring back, watching Sarah flirt from girl to girl like a floating butterfly gave me enough insight into what I was expected to do. Within months, I had become his handy little helper. Not only would I run to his beck and call, but I also aided Glenn in bringing in more girls to keep the appetite of our sexually starving chief from going hungry. I once asked Glenn why she did what she did for him, instead of having a common monogamous relationship and getting jealous like normal partners would. She replied simply, "It takes the pressure off me having to do it." That said it all. We were all under the shade of Jeffrey's money tree, and not even someone like her could escape its lure. Just like Glenn had trained me, it was now my job to reiterate that onto other girls, and thus the cycle of girls trying to climb the chain of hierarchy would start all over each time I brought a new one in. The sessions rarely differed much. They would mostly start out with Jeffrey on top of the massage table, already naked, and me leading a girl into massaging him. Until his instructions came to remove our clothing, and if they agreed to do that, then Jeffrey knew he had him in his pocket and could do whatever else he wanted. He was never turned down in the many years I stayed with him. Never being shy, he would tell us to start kissing each other, or depending on what he wanted, we would perform erotic acts, sometimes with him fondling us, or just masturbating while he watched. On explicit occasions, sex toys would be used on us girls, making it all the more exciting for him to observe. Ending with the payment of $200 for the new girl and $400 to me for bringing her. He would then wait for us to leave before adding the event details of names and payments in a little black diary he kept with him wherever he went. So, if he were in any one of the cities he lived in, he would always have contacts for sex. I was slowly climbing the ladder, as Jeffrey was happy taking me everywhere with him, within the States. Merely at home, I distanced myself from my family altogether, and with Jeffrey renting me an apartment in Royal Palm Beach, as well as a plush furnished apartment in New York City, there was hardly a need to see them. I just couldn't face everyone thinking they all knew what I was really doing, traveling around with a man old enough to be my grandfather, who supposedly only wanted me for massages. Much further convincing myself of the lies I told myself, I took a liking to the Xanax. It felt like it was all a dream at times, even meeting up with old contacts from school years who experimented with drugs. I was flying around the country, seeing so many places in America I had only heard about in movies, and making more money than anyone my age, and loving it. My friends didn't believe the lies I told them about only being a massage therapist, some of them even asking if they can meet Jeffrey too. At this point in my life, my heart went missing for a while, and I stooped so low. I was even bringing my friends. I just saw them as easy commission. When I wasn't playing servant to my master, I was partying hard, eventually using ecstasy pills, acid, and marijuana to disillusion the times I would have had away from Jeffrey to think about what I was actually doing with my life. I realized something one day when I was alone. Although I had Jeffrey to attend to sexually, it was not gratifying. I needed someone to come home to, someone I could call my boyfriend, and that showed me emotion, not just a job to get done. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7. A knock came to my apartment door one lazy afternoon while we were in Palm Beach. I looked through the peephole and didn't recognize the once familiar face. I asked from behind the closed door, "Who is it?" The voice of the reply was one I wasn't anticipating to hear ever again. It was my junior high crush and childhood friend, TJ. The last time I saw him, I was a runaway, and he had let me stay at his house for a few days. Telling his parents nothing, he had kept me hidden in his room. At nightfall, he said to knock on his window, and I could jump through and stay the night. Until I was picked up by authorities during school hours and questioned why I wasn't in school. They did some resourcing, finding out I was a runaway. They delivered me back to my angry parents. "Oh my God, you finally answered your door, girl." And in a whirlwind, TJ stormed back into my life, even moving into my apartment secretly within 2 weeks of his arrival. He had changed so much from the last time I had seen him. He used to be this hard-looking rocker type. Now he's cleaned up, wearing preppy clothes and shooting out Tupac lyrics. He had the same old big brown eyes, though, and when he told me he had heard I was back in town, but was unable to ever get a hold of me, he just kept knocking at my door every so often, I was told. How sweet, I thought. He must care about me if he was so intent on approaching me. Not even thinking he would have spoken to the girls from our junior high circle, and they would have mentioned him I was back in town, what I was doing, and where to find me. We were a drug-induced romance, which budded from fake emotions the effects made us feel. He got what he wanted, a free ride, not having to work, and I got what I deserved. A man who could let me go away with this multi-billionaire I regarded as my second boyfriend. I didn't want to alarm Jeffrey in me having a boyfriend, so I kept it quiet, till during a massage I was giving to him one afternoon. We were having a conversation about some of my friends, the party girls I'd brought in to meet him. Jeffrey started asking questions about the different types of drugs they used, hearing them speak about in his presence. I thought a person on drugs would be all strung out and looking like hell. "But the girls you know look great," he stated face down during the massage. That's when I told him I'd been dabbling in ecstasy lately too, and I thought it was the most amazing feeling one could even fathom. I tried to describe the euphoric feelings he gave me, and even joked with him about wanting to pet anything furry that was around. And there was the constant need to flick my tongue ring around in my mouth. It was great having such an open conversation about things Jeffrey had never experienced before. And he seemed okay with everything I was telling him as we were having a good laugh together. So I thought I could push it a bit further and tell him the truth about TJ, since it was bound to come out sooner than later. I'd rather not the latter, when it would look even worse than I kept the truth from him for so long. Well, why we're opening up about things together, I continued by saying, I had met someone from my past, and we've been hanging out a lot lately. When I haven't been traveling with you, I have been with him, and I was wondering if you minded if I started to see this guy. He started to laugh out loud. Are you serious? Of course not. No one in this world is monogamous. Why would I expect you to be? Oh, excuse me. I was smitten with relief, but a little bit disheartened when I heard him speak that way. I wondered to myself if he'd had his own personal encounter with heartache. Of course, the evening concluded in the same way it always had. The only reason I was really even there in the first place. Upon his request, I straddled him on top of the table and let him explode with pleasure inside of me. Thinking the entire time about TJ, I felt so terrible, but I quickly had to wipe the thoughts of guilt from my mind, not to give Jeffrey the wrong impression. So I had myself busy with 2 men in my life, but that's not what I really wanted for myself. I wanted an occupation that would eventually set me free from depending on a man as a source of my survival. I asked Jeffrey before I left for the evening when my real training was going to begin, and he liked my assertiveness. I thought it meant to him that I was taking my job with him seriously, but it was all part of his master plan to keep me at his side. Within a couple weeks of my persistence, Jeffrey introduced me to a couple of real working massage therapists, not only with credentials, but with their own clientele too. I was in awe of their teachings. It all made me so much sense about the body and what they were saying. I felt like I had picked myself up out of the lurches and had a direction again. I was in the middle of another training session with Jeffrey, the recipient, as useful, being it was rare for Ghislaine to ask for a massage, unless, of course, it was for Jeffrey's own pleasure to watch the punchline of the session, when I was shocked to hear Jeffrey ask one of the therapists to now remove her shirt. He had no shame, I thought. Even though she was above his usual age criteria, she was still a pretty woman in her early 30s with curly blonde hair and had an athletic body for a mother of 2 children. She didn't hesitate in his request. It looked like something out of a role-playing porn scene, with the therapist removing her white uniform to reveal her beautiful nude body and a much darker side to her personality. I couldn't believe it at first. It was such a state of shock, and I began to question myself if this was normal in the massage profession to expect this kind of clientele to request such degrading tasks, even though they were professionals. At the end of the session, she was paid $300 and an additional $100 for helping me to train as well, and I was paid my usual $200. Then we were both invited by Jeffrey to join him out by the pool for a cool dip. Jeffrey making a few phone calls while her and I undressed again for a swim. I wanted to ask her a few personal questions about what she's come to learn about the massage therapy game, but I never got the chance as we were joined by Ghislaine moments later. She was asking how my training was going and booked the therapist in for herself the following morning, where she was invited back to do another training session with me. It didn't take long to figure out why. I was at my apartment when I received a phone call from Jeffrey. I thought it was the usual call to come over to his house, but he surprised me. Instead, I would be going to the exclusive hotel in Palm Beach tonight, the Breakers, where I would be meeting my first ever clients. Only told their first names, I was given some instructions, and the address were to meet Glenn and Ava. Ooh, I think we know where this is going. They were a married couple with one on the way. I was quite concerned when I heard she was pregnant, being I really didn't know the body that well and didn't want to inflict any wrongdoing on the unborn baby. But Jeffrey insisted I take this job. Just massage her gently where she wants to be rubbed, and to save all my energy for Glenn's massage, since it was going to be a 4-hour job. In an emphasized tone of voice, I was being coached by Jeffrey to treat Glenn with exactly whatever he wanted, just like I do for Jeffrey himself. It was my last bit of preparation before he sent me out to his friends, and my first taste of responsibility in upholding his reputation. At around 7 p.m., I took a taxi to the address I was given and found them on the residential side of the giant hotel's extensive property. When I arrived in their apartment, it was a far cry from the lavish place I was expecting. Still really nice, but had a cozier family feel to it. It was just beginning to get dark when Ava and I went to the master bedroom, and she undressed to reveal the first naked, pregnant body I had ever seen. It was fascinating to see her in the later stages of maternity, and strangely enough, it was a miraculous and wondrous sight. She was a former model, and one of Jeffrey's many entourages from his past had gotten too old for his taste, and was married off to a wealthy colleague of his. Lying down in the bed, I adjusted the pillows to try and make her more comfortable. I began to massage her as Jeffrey had instructed me to, softly and slowly. So at ease with her new body, she even asked me to massage her swelling breasts in a non-sexual way. Not knowing any other way but that way, I was trying to oblige her request, doing the best I could to relieve her, but couldn't help but giggle to myself at the very sight of this. She said she was very happy at the end of the massage and rolled over to go to sleep, asking me to turn out the light at the end of it. Closed the door gently, as if not to disturb her, and went to find my other client. The apartment's lights had been turned out for the sleeping children, and I found Glenn, awaiting for me in the lounge room, where I had to call out, "Excuse me," as I couldn't see him in the dark. There was a throw rug on the ground that he had already placed out as he began to strip down in preparation of the massage. Lying frontwards facing me with his exposed and ever-growing manhood, I asked him to roll over to begin the massage. He complied with a cheeky smile, and from his eagerness to show he was not shy indeed, I already knew where this was going to end up. I found it much more strenuous to massage on the floor, but I wouldn't let that hold me back. I wanted to have a career, and this being my first ever clients, I didn't want them to disapprove. Nearly 4 hours after I had gotten there, I was still hard at work, mentally preparing for the other end of the session. He just let me know when he was ready to begin the other side of my job, and just like Jeffrey did the first time, he requested me to take off my clothes, starting with my shirt. When I complied, the requests kept coming in, and before I could change my mind and run away, I was having intercourse with this man that was so comfortable doing all of this while his pregnant wife and children slept in the room beside us. When he had climaxed, we both got up and dressed, and he paid me a large tip, even though Jeffrey would be the one to actually pay me for my time spent there. Just like it had all started, it had all ended so quickly, and now that was that. I had to accept what my duties were, and now I could go back to Jeffrey, who would be further pleased in my demonstrations to keep him happy. I was called the next morning to come over to Jeffrey's mansion that afternoon for lunch. a swim, and of course, session. Knowing all too well they'd be expecting the gory details of last night's events with my new clientele, I came there at 1 p.m. as requested and sat down for a light lunch and a swim. Jeffrey was mostly conducting business from his offside pool office, but he came to ask me if everything went well the night before. I told him I did everything asked of me, and I'm quite confident both my clients were more than pleased with me. He gave me a quick grin before he headed back to his office, throwing a purple grape down his throat as he walked away. Lying out on one of the pool decks, blue and white striped lounge beds, I was waiting for Jeffrey to finish his business so I could give him his massage. He never took too long with his work, unless there was something wrong, and then we would all have to wear his mood. But today he seemed fine, though. We went up the stairs. He told me we would be leaving for his ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico in the morning, and I needed to be packed and ready tonight. They loved leaving in the spur of the moment. Jeffrey once said he checks with his pilot, Larry, on the best weather before he heads to a different destination. I enjoyed spending time at his ranch, being it was my favorite of all his residences. He had a lavish, Mediterranean-looking castle on the top of a hill that overlooked his extensive 7,500 acres of property. Has an indoor pool, gym, and all the trimmings of extravagance I could only imagine. I had a great time on the quad bikes. Sarah and I often got scolded for tipping one over going too fast or trying to go up a steep hill. But we knew those weren't the things he cared about, so it wouldn't matter. My favorite of it all was his little town with its own fire station and truck, stables full of horses, and little cottages where the housekeepers and ranch hands lived. On my own time, I would take one of the quad bikes down to the stables and saddle up on one of his beautiful horses and go for a ride in the open terrain. It was coming up to the end of a very cold winter, and it still had the snow-covered mountaintops and brisk air that I loved to take in during my many trail rides. I had been an experienced horse rider since my childhood and could honestly pinpoint some of the best memories of my life being on the back of a horse. I claimed with thrill in my voice, "Great, I'll get packed as soon as I get back to my apartment." He threw in, "Pack for a few weeks. We'll also be making a pit stop to LA for some business afterwards, and then to NYC. I was used to these round trips with him. It was great, as I was saving loads of cash and about to buy myself my first car. Jeffrey, Ghislaine, Emmy, and I all left the following morning, as planned. Arriving in only a few hours at his awe-inspiring Santa Fe Palace was always a delight. Still frisk in the air, my petite frame looked even smaller in these gigantic overcoats. Nonetheless, I was looking forward to spending time out in the fresh, clean air and open land. After a few days of leisurely spending our time in the ranch, we went to the Indian markets in Albuquerque for a bit of shopping and sightseeing. Jeffrey wasn't the most off-road kind of guy, so when we went sightseeing, it was more like museums, boutique shopping, and local art galleries. Still a splendid trip, though. With me picking up a few nifty collectibles to bring back for my family, and knowing how much my mom loves Indian apparel, I thought it would have put me back in her good books for a while. I hoped, at least. There was some lengthy time to put in a little water under the bridge between my folks and I. But with my life heading in a different direction, I didn't see any use in holding on to so much hate, especially that I didn't even have to see him that much. We got back to Zorro Ranch, the name Jeffrey chose to call the massive land he bought to build his fortress on. And Jeffrey told me that he was looking forward to one of my famous relaxing massages. And with that notion, he gave my bags of shopping to one of the many housemaids who greeted us at the front door and asked her to bring my bags to the exquisite room I was staying in. We headed straight downstairs just past the massage room and gym. There's an indoor heated pool, shower, and spa. First, Jeffrey wanted to warm up in the spa underneath a decorated ceiling of clouds and blue skies. Starting the massage in the spa, I rubbed his feet while he reclined into the spa's jets. We spoke of the museum and some of the knickknacks I had bought him, and thanked him for the turquoise earrings and necklace he had got for me as a gift, joking about not ever knowing what to get for him, being that he was the richest man I'd ever known. By no far means did we ever have any kind of a mutual, respectful bond between us. But there was a significant softer side he began to share with me that was different from how he treated his other girls. Maybe it was my feet that filled the shoes for that time being, or the fact my novelty hadn't worn off yet. But whatever it was, I was getting confused from the double-sided life I was leading. He got up from the spa tub shortly thereafter and asked me to come wash him in the shower. It was nothing unordinary to me. I was used to his need to be nurtured and pampered. I performed his request with a cheerful mannerism, letting him think I was taking care of him out of my sheer sweetness. I got the towels ready for him to get out of the shower and towel dried him, patting his skin instead of rubbing, as previously instructed. You know, you have a very maternal instinct. You'll make a fine mother someday, he would constantly acclaim at my gentleness. I hope so, I replied. I would love to have my own babies one day, but not anytime soon, laughing at the very thought of that. We walked up the steps and through the French doors into the gym's adjoining massage room. It was a smaller room than his other houses, placing the emphasis on the large massage table in the center. I grabbed another clean towel to keep him warm while I prepared the music, lights, and oils. He liked me to use mostly lavender or other aromatherapy scents, which reminded me of woodlands in the spring. Always enjoying the beginning of the massage, I put my heart and soul into training in my profession. I could just close my eyes. I would see only with my hands the areas that needed the most work. And even though I wasn't a professional yet, Jeffrey could feel, told me there wasn't many that could please him during a massage being untrained. I'm sure now it was just something he'd say nice to all the girls. But in the time I had known him, I could honestly say it wasn't like him to compliment girls in any other way than regards to a sexual performance or their looks. I was flattered at his praise, and when the massage was over, so were the sentiments. I was back to being used for my body and what I could do with it. With him satisfied and off for a nap, I could go do whatever I had wanted. Like usually, I would go down to the stables or something adventurous. But today I was in a melancholy mood, just wanting to relax and unwind myself in the giant tub in the bathroom. I got out some of the oils I used on Jeffrey, putting him in the steaming water, and popped 2 of my Xanax pills, forgetting about my troubles and focusing on the quiet moment at hand, just wanting to soak up the peacefulness of it. Nearly slipping away to sleep in the tub, I was startled when I got the call on the intercom to come down for dinner. Everybody seemed in good spirits at dinner, which helped to lift mine. We all ate our meals and went into the movie room to watch a newly released movie. It was a ritualistic scenario. Most nights that everyone was at ease, we would all just sit in one of his various located movie rooms and hang out together. Just as he always would, Jeffrey asked Emmy and me to both grab a foot during a movie that night and just keep massaging through the film. We were always on call for duty, no matter where we were or whatever time it was. He would just pop a foot up or pass over his hand at any given time and require a massage. Even if the film went over for 2 hours, I would still be required to sit on the floor rubbing his hands or feet, and even his scalp at times. After the credits had rolled, Ghislaine got up to close the door to the room, and I knew she had received the signals herself and would proceed to manipulate, violate, and use us to satisfy Jeffrey's urges once more before he went to bed. The blue illumination from the empty TV screen was glaring in the tenebrous room. As we watched her undress in a light that relied on the reflection of the moon through the window's peak to show its preceding display. She walked back to the sofa where I was sitting at Jeffrey's feet, still rubbing away, and uncovered her shirt, displaying ample bosoms for his appeal. Approaching me like a lioness hunting her prey, she stood me up and led me to the other couch across from Jeffrey and situated herself on top of me, sliding her fingers through my dress to unbutton my attire, revealing my girlish figure and two small peaks. Pushing my head into her breasts, I was being fondled by Emmy at the same time, which took her cue when she saw Ghislaine look in my direction. From an occasional glance upwards, I could see that Jeffrey was up to his methodical foreplay, stroking his manhood while watching the build-up to his main event. They both took turns, making me moan from their touches, and when Ghislaine was ready too, she would insinuate we do the same to her. She urged me downwards until my head was between her open legs and giving into her wanton indulgence. 20 minutes passed before Jeffrey exerted his last energies for the night. The only advantage of being with an old man was they could never last long. Departing to our own separate quarters for the night, I called TJ for condolence. It was so important for me to feel like I had someone out there who saw me as more than a pretty girl with vulnerabilities. I needed to maintain some sort of connection to my youthful side, but it would be to no avail as I was getting used to being badly disappointed by all the men in my life. End of chapter 7. We will continue with chapter 8 in my next broadcast, which will be sometime tonight, I hope. I need to rest my voice again and get a snack. So bear with me on that. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Deborah, Jordan, Eddie, Wanda, and by Wanda I mean Dolly. Ecstasy 187, I recognize your name as well. And of course, my moderator, Quadrex, the GOAT moderator. If you guys like this broadcast, feel free to give me a subscription. It's in the bottom right-hand corner. It's free to do. I really appreciate it. It helps me with the YouTube algorithms. And if you find that some of my videos have been censored or removed by YouTube, which some have, such as my George Webb interviews, my interview with John Wedger, one of my interviews with John Wedger, as well as a couple other videos. They are all on my brand YouTube. They don't censor over there. So if you guys want to give me a subscription over there, that would be really appreciated. They made me a Rhodium account, which is one of their premium accounts over there, which I'm really grateful for. Other Rhodium accounts are people like Miss Breeze, Sean is, Ryan. So it feels good to be in that sort of company. So if people want to give me a sub over there, all my material will be over there uncensored. If you feel even more inclined to support, feel free to give me a donation on PayPal or GoFundMe, or you can just do a $1 Patreon subscription as well. I am changing my Patreon and updating it continually. So stay frosty. This is the best in the Midwest. Addy Adkin, the chosen one, and the lonely Ronin, the Jedi without a master, and the samurai without one as well. Stay frosty, and until next time, folks.